All right. I think this is my time to come up and talk for a few minutes. I'm not sure how sturdy this little guy is. So anyway, if during my time of talking I fall off the stool, you come rescue me. Russell Epperson. I'm in Lewistown. We've been there 12 years starting this August. So 12 years. The time has flown. I have a senior in high school. He's right there. A couple of girls over here, and my beautiful wife, Allison. We celebrate 25 years later this month. Man, time has flown, and it's been a beautiful ride, and hopefully we get a few more years to minister and do good works here in this world. I'm going to talk today, and I'm going to tell stories. So far, boy, it's rough to go last or near the end of all these guys talking, and kind of talked about the intellectual, the thoughts of how does this really all work, how does it fit together, and I'm going to try to give you some examples of things that I've experienced or seen that make it very real to me, at least. And there's going to be things I'm going to talk about that are uncomfortable. I'm going to talk about some traumas. Today we use this word triggering, and my daughter used it even recently. We were talking about the little child last night that was coughing, and I was ready to go do the Heimlich. I know several other nurses were probably, but I was on edge, literally leaning, and was like, "Child, better take a breath soon or I'm coming." And she said, "I knew you were triggered by that, Dad." If you have ever experienced loss, specifically, if you've lost a child, I'm going to tell a story later that's tough. And so I just want you to know that now. I'm going to talk about things that are strange, uncomfortable. So if that bothers you, it's completely okay to get up and leave if it's something that you've experienced or it just bothers you to that point. So fair warning about that. Because we're talking about spiritual warfare, right? If we're talking about spiritual warfare, at some point that becomes very real to us in terms of, we were just talking sicknesses or whatever it might be, but especially attacks from those from the world, attacks from those from within, whatever that might look like. And sometimes it's a very physical attack in terms of accusations or slander or whatever it might be. But we also see things we can't explain, at least I have. And that's what I want to relay to you today, is things that I can't explain. And this is where, we were talking, my wife and I, we talked about this for a while, and this idea of, what wording do we use? And I'm just going to use the word darkness. At times I see darkness that looks like it's here. It's present. And so these stories, that's what we're going to discuss. And then it's up to you. You make your own choices about those type things. But I'm going to tell you what I've seen and things that I've experienced. A book that I would recommend, and I've only really read this one book on, angels, demons, that type wording. Seeing the Unseen by Joe Beam. We studied this at the Estes Church of Christ over by Freed Hardeman years ago. And he does a great job of lining out all the scriptures that talk about demons, that talks about Satan, that talks about angels, and says, look, based on these passages, this looks like how this world works to some degree. An excellent book to at least introduce you to this idea of angels, demons, what's going on in that context. We obviously don't know all the answers, right? If someone comes to me later and says, well, I know all the answers, this is how it works, and this is exactly what it looks like, I'm going to say, nice, good, that's good for you. If you figured out the whole world of spiritual warfare, then more power to you. But I don't think that's going to happen for any of us. And of course, we think we can make some lines here or there. I'm just going to leave those lines for you to discuss. So as I get started tonight, the way this afternoon, the way I want to preface this, when I think about how I'm going to address it, it's really how am I going to help people in severe spiritual warfare. That's really what I do, and that's really the context in what I have, these stories that I'm going to tell you. So hopefully I'm able to express to you maybe, because you're the 20%, you know that? You're the 20% of the church that does 80% of the work. If not, you probably wouldn't be here at this special event on a weekend. You're the workers. You're the ones that are taking this very seriously. And so you're going to be the ones probably in the trenches helping some of these people who are under extreme spiritual attack in some cases by their own decision. In fact, I think in all cases, by their own actions and their own decisions. Okay? So, talking about what we can do as far as how do we prepare ourselves, they've already done a great job of that, right? And I think all the lessons so far, talking about guarding our hearts, putting on the full armor of God, I think those are all obvious things as Christians. Living in the fruit of the Spirit, if we're not living into that, and it's obvious through our life that we're fruit of the Spirit kind of people, then we're not ready to go and help others because we're still fighting our own battles. Baptism, the Holy Spirit coming to us, we've got to have that as a Christian to even begin to think about helping someone else, much less helping ourselves. This phrase, you got to be prayed up. You ever heard that before? I was getting ready to do something, and one of the ladies at church said, "Well, you better be prayed up before you go try to fight that battle." And I was like, "Oh," it kind of took me aback. You better have spent time in prayer. We bathed this in prayer as a phrase used earlier, but you better be prayed up if you're going to go fight some spiritual battles and face this enemy. And I want to talk about my stories now. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories. This is a story of a Christian. He's a believer. Let's say it that way. A Christian man, a believer. I don't know all of his past. I've only got to know him in the last probably 5 years. We're going to call him Bob. Easy way of, if you're a Bob, sorry, but that's who we're going to talk about today. Bob is afflicted with darkness. He openly talks about this struggle within him. He'll use the word, "I have a demon," or that demon that persecutes me. That's his language that he'll use. But this man will go from one day being a reasonable person to the next day of cursing me. He calls me Reverend. There you go. That's one of those phrases that he's the only one I've ever had that calls me Reverend, but I kind of get a kick out of it, and I'm like, yeah, well, Bob, you don't understand. But anyway, okay, yeah, Reverend is what he calls me. And I think it's jovial sometimes the way he uses the phrase, but he has cursed me. He has said awful things to me when I'm literally bringing him food to his doorstep. He has talked about hate. I've seen him grit his teeth it would scare you probably, but got bad teeth and those piercing eyes, and just grit his teeth and shake with fury and wish death. Last week, that guy at your church, I hope he's riding down the road and somebody pulls out in front of him and they hit him, and I hope he dies. And I hope his head splatters on the ground. Literal wishing death on someone. And this guy is just full of hate. And then he'll call me back the next day. I am so sorry the way I acted yesterday, and I know God doesn't want that for me, and I know Jesus doesn't want that for me. And you talk about not knowing what to do. These things that we were talking about earlier with shame, talks about the amount of shame that he bears for being born. All these deceptions and these lies. Why am I telling you this? I want you to know that it's real. We deal with, I think, aspects of it, right? We're tempted and we fall and we repent and we move on. And there are some who've gotten so deep into this darkness that it almost looks like they can't get out of it. But he'll talk about shame, and he'll talk about the pain that he feels, and that he wishes God had never made him. If there is a God, sometimes he'll say, I wish that he would have never made me. Why did he put me in this body to undergo this kind of misery? And I think at other times he's welcomed darkness. And so he seems to be caught in this trap of in one world and in the other world, and he's not, it seems, fully submitted to Jesus. He'll listen to music that's not godly. He'll listen to radio shows that just twist and the Satan's lies of deception. I see that in what he listens to. And then at other times it seems like he's wanting to do what's right, and he's begging God to help him through that. Is there mental illness involved in that? Is there abuse from drugs and whatever else it might have been? Yeah. Is there darkness at work in him? Yeah. I don't know what that looks like. I'm not telling you to, this is exactly what's happening on day 2. He's got this demon, or I don't understand that. I don't know that. But I know at times he's in such a dark place that I don't know that he can get out. I'm going to talk a little bit later about what I want to do as far as being a Christian, what it looks like for me to be present in his life. There's been times I've been threatened. There's been times where I thought he might hurt me. And I'm not some brave bragging to any degree. I'm scared. I'm walking in thinking, I don't know if I should do this. And then I'm there and I'm like, Lord, and I've said it sitting out in front of his house before, all right, Lord, we're going to go do this. Here I am. I need your help. So whatever this looks like, I'm asking you to help. There was a time we were installing his air conditioning unit. It was a window unit, been sitting outside all winter. We put it in the window, we plug it in, and it's not turning on. I said, I'm sure the circuit's blown. I'm sure the circuit's blown. There's a little circuit on the power cord, so I think we're probably going to need to work on that. And he's starting to get worked up. These people that stole that from me, and if I didn't have to put it outside, them people, this, that. And before I know it, all of a sudden the plug goes flying by my ear. And it's one of those, big one that's got the circuit breaker built in. And it literally brushes the hair on my head. And the whole unit flies out the window. He had just completely come unwound and shoved the air conditioner out the window, and it went 6 feet out. And at that point, I just jumped up and said, yeah, I can't do this, and I left. Fits of anger unlike anything I've ever seen before. And scary, to the core of, I need to get away from this. I need to leave right now. And so I did. But he is despairing, wishes he'd never been born. He's pushed everybody away, his own family. So all these things that we were talking about, was it Zach that was talking about those things, if I don't get too confused? He has bathed himself in those things, and he continues. He seems like he's unable to get out of them. And that's scary. That's darkness in this world. He wishes death on people. Hate is just spewing. He'll literally get so worked up, and he's so shaking that he spits as he's trying to talk about these things with such anger in his heart. That's darkness of this world. That's not from God, obviously. It's from the dark one. It's from evil. It works in this world in real ways in real people. That's where that darkness, that world seems to be coming in and maybe touching our world today. We see it in ways, and maybe you've seen these things. Maybe you haven't, but I want our kids especially. If you give yourself into these dark things, if you participate in that life long enough, it can go into a place where maybe you're unrecoverable. Now, through the power of Jesus, obviously, anybody can be saved, right? But can you get so worked up into darkness and so into it that you can't see your way out of it? You get so dark into that pit, you won't listen to anybody else, you won't accept anything else, and you want to be in that place. I sure hope that these people can be pulled out of that pit. And I know that Jesus can do it, but that person has to decide that's what they want. It seems like it's just a little sin. It's just a little deception. And before we know it, maybe we're getting into areas like Bob, that I'll call him in this situation. So Bob has a belief in God. I want to tell another story, and it's a disturbing story. I work as a chaplain with the sheriff's office, and I've told this to some people. I get called in I just showed up one day, and I said, hey, Sheriff, just wanted to check in. How are things going? And at that point, sitting in his office, someone from another room that's been monitoring the inmates says, Sheriff, get in the back now. And in that tone of voice of panic, don't ask questions, get in the back. And he said, where? Women's cell. And I hear she's hung herself and she's not moving. So I instantly say, I'm an EMT, do you want me to go back? And in kind of a little bit of a chaotic time, they said, yes, get back there now. Take your phone out, take your keys out. I had a pocket knife in my pocket. I had to throw them into a drawer real quick, and then I'm first time ever going back into the jail cell area of the sheriff's office. We run into a room, and there's a woman laying in the floor without a shirt on, and she had taken her shirt off, wrapped it around her neck, and tied it onto a faucet or something in the room to kill herself. And she had near succeeded. She's laying on the floor, not breathing. So we began CPR. I began helping with chest compressions and kind of, I was the only EMT on scene at that point, so I'm telling them some things we can do and opening up her airway. And she begins to respond. And during that time, and it's emotional to think about, and I cry a lot if you don't know that. Most of you do. I'm seeing this, and I'm watching her, and she's beginning to take a breath or two. During that time, she begins to, there's kind of frothing at the mouth type thing going on, and of course with CPR and other things that can be the case. But she begins to awaken, and we're trying to get, IVs or whatever else that we can do. She becomes restless and moaning, and I think maybe even the word no, might have heard that a few times. She becomes so violent, and we're trying to hold her down during this time, and I'm holding her right arm. That's all I had. There were 5 or 6 of us in there. I had her right arm, and I could not keep it on the ground. She was so physically strong at that point. There's 300-pound men like sitting on both legs, and she's bucking everybody around. I come to find out later that she, for 2 days, had been screaming and yelling and cursing obscenities in the jail cell. She had she was full of just this evil and this hate. And she was screaming and yelling and having all kinds of fits, and then she ends up willing to take her own life. And as we tried to deal with her in this moment of reviving her, trying to bring her back, and seemingly she resisting that. I've never seen that. I've been on CPR calls numerous times, and I've never seen what I saw that day. And we walked out of that room. We got her. We had to sedate her, and they used about 3 to 4 times the normal amount of sedation to get her to go down. They would give her a hit, and I'm like, oh, here we go, and another hit, and she's throwing us around, laying on top of her. She was about 110 pounds. I mean, literally just a very tiny thing. Ends up, we finally get her sedated. She is okay, and she lived. Supposedly, she moved to Helena. If you're here today, that would be an awesome end to this story. If she was in a very dark place for a long, long time. She had been into drugs. She had been into whatever it might be that you want to. She had lived that lifestyle. She had accepted that lifestyle. And here she begins, and she takes her own life. And I don't know what was going on in those moments. I've never physically experienced anything like it. And when we walked out of that room, I mean, we were just glassy-eyed, and there were other unbelieving people there that just looked at me and thought, we all were just kind of going, mm-hmm. And there was words, spoken about darkness and what in the world did we just see? What did we just experience? I think people can get to the point where they welcome darkness, where they allow it to come in. I remember visiting in that same prison, that same jail cell there in Fergus County, and having an inmate come in, and he had a big tattoo right here. You could see it from the V of his shirt there he was wearing. And he said, yeah, I was kind of into Satan stuff, and I got a tattoo with it. I wished I hadn't done that. I mean, there are people out there that embrace the darkness. And when they embrace that kind of darkness, I think they can allow things to happen to them that I don't know how to explain to you. What do you want to call it? You call it what you will, but let's call it darkness today. I don't want to talk about that later on as we will discuss. We haven't done this, you correct me if I'm wrong, we haven't talked about it much. The spiritual warfare, we've talked a lot about, the Satan and all this, but we haven't really talked about the angelic side as much. I'll say it that way. So I'm going to tell you a story, and it's very vulnerable. The first person I told it to, I don't think they're here anymore, but Isaac was talking about Hayden Trapp from Billings, and he was the first person I told. Not even my own wife. It was too personal, too powerful, too just the vulnerability. But in a Billings Youth Rally, we were talking in the back. He shared some things, and I shared this story. And he was maybe taken aback, and he said, "Thank you for sharing that with me." And I've only told 3 or 4 other people, is what I would say about this. As a chaplain, we had a bad call that happened behind the fire department, literally just in the backyard. And a mother had put her child down to sleep and went to the bathroom to take a shower, and she had moved a little freezer into the hallway, maybe to keep the child from, roaming around the house. It might have been a pet, but I think it was just for the child to not come back while she was quickly taking a shower. She goes into the shower, she comes out, and the trailer's engulfed in flames. There was a Christmas tree really close to where the toddler had been, and it looks as though that tree's caught fire. The mother runs in, she tries to get over to the top of the freezer. It's too hot. She's reaching over to try to move it. She receives a lot of burns on her face. She actually ran out of her trailer to the fire department, unclothed. If you can imagine, all of a sudden, an unclothed woman that looks like she's on fire, running into the fire department, police department. They are all there together. Chaos, of course, ensues. Fire department runs and, trying to do things. The father was at work, so it's a bad fire. There's no recovery in that room. They couldn't even get in the trailer. So the child's gone, right? We go to the hospital. I'm with the sheriff, and the mother is sitting in a bed. So she is, her hair is just, up, singed. She's very sooty. On her top, she had, I think, a paper gown on at that point. And we had to tell her that her child was gone. She knew, right? But we had to say the words. And so we said the words. The undersheriff said the words. I'm standing there with her, the father and the mother. And of course, just complete, pure grief, screams, and cursing. Just uncontrollable grief and sadness pour out from this mother and from the father. And so I witnessed that, and we do our best. We actually collected some money from local churches, and she had to go to the burn unit in Salt Lake City. And so we sent her out down with like $1,500 in cash, collected it like in an hour. It was awesome just to see God working through church and such. And so they go away, and she gets treatment, and that's a good story, and things happen that help her get better. In the meantime, we've got about 30 responders that are dealing with horrible trauma from this situation. There's people who went and collected the child and did what they needed to do. There are people like me that were there with the mom and the dad and stayed long term. I stayed in the ER for 4 or 5 hours that day. And at the time, you get through with adrenaline and just pure desire to want to help in the situation, in a very helpless situation. So time goes on, and the next couple of 3 days were tough. The next week was tough, and it kept getting tough. One night I said, Allison, we need to go out of town. I said, I got to get away from this town. And we drove to Belgrade, and we got a hotel room. We drove through a blinding snowstorm that I couldn't see past the end of the hood, and it was dangerous. And I had made Allison very nervous about, I have to leave. I need to get away from here. I have to go now. Everybody get in the car type discussion. And then us driving through there, it was like I was mad. She was very scared for us and our family. And so we get to Belgrade. I think we hung out and maybe even went to the hot springs with the Crooks, if I remember right, maybe. We just needed to get away, and I needed to refresh my mind. And I get back to Lewistown, and it's not gone. I'm seeing her and hearing her scream. Anytime I would close my eyes, try to sleep, whatever it might have been. And so I need help. I need to get rid of that somehow. And I don't know how. And it's, how do you define that as darkness or whatever it might be? Like I said, I think Zach talked about trauma. And it's real. And it does really bad things to a lot of good people. It's one of my desires to be the chaplain for Fergus County responders because I think they need that. Because they let it fester, it turns into evil, it turns into darkness, and it ruins marriages, it ruins lives, and they take their own life a lot of times. So I'm sitting and thinking, I got to do something. I call, and I have access to a counselor. She's a Christian woman. And I said, I need to talk to you. I got to get through this. She said, well, I'm only meeting through Zoom. I said, okay. I got an EMT meeting at 5. She said, I'll call you. Can you call at 6:15? I said, yeah, let's do that. So I was in my EMT meeting away at this location. And I got done. It was still going, so I said, I got to go. I got an appointment. I went and sat in my truck. And I'm kind of looking west in this parking lot. And it's dark. It's wintertime. And I get on the phone with the counselor, and she's asking me questions, and she's talking about it, and I might cry, I might have whatever I needed to do to tell her what had happened. And as we talked, she's like, "Oh my, that's heavy. I'm sorry." And I said, "I don't know what to do. It won't leave me alone. I can't let go of it." And she said something that sounds so weird. She said, "Well, have you given it to Jesus?" I'm a minister, right? I should know these things. And I thought, and I said, no. That hasn't crossed my mind, really. In that sense of, have you just given it to Jesus? In that moment, she said, well, that's what you need to do. And in that moment, you take it how you will, my mind's eye, but she kept talking. I'm looking out through the windshield of my truck, and I see a building. I think I know which one it is. It was 2 or 3 blocks away. And I saw maybe a tree behind it, and it reminded me of a steeple. And I kind of focused on that. And in those moments, she's talking in the background. But in my mind, I felt my mind it went somewhere. It felt different. And I watched as angels came down. My mind's eye, my imagination, you do what you will with it. And I watched those angels come down, and I was overwhelmed, couldn't speak. And they took it, and they went away with it. And from that moment, it has not bothered me since. I think God still works in those ways. What do we do when we pray for God to take away pain or trauma or whatever the pain is that we're experiencing? I think sometimes the answer is, we talked about illnesses. Sometimes I think the answer is no or not yet. But that was not my pain to bear. I didn't need to hold on to that. And I think God sent his angels to remove that. And from that day forward, from that moment forward, I can talk about it. I can see her in my mind's eye, laying in that bed, semi-reclined, soot-covered, hair had been singed, no eyebrows. And it doesn't cause me the pain that it was causing me. Now, I think that mom and that dad, they're still suffering. And there's pain. And I don't know that they've allowed Christ to take away that trauma. I don't think they're believers. But as believers, we have access to a heavenly army. Amen? If we're going to talk about this evil side, then we also have access to this side. I'm thinking of the Old Testament where, it looks like 1 or 2 guys, and I'm not going to give details because I didn't read it ahead of time, but you got a couple of people standing and looking, and there's an army in front of them, and then God reveals, and what? They're surrounded by the heavenly army, right? Those that are with you are more than those that are out there in front of you, if I paraphrase. And I think it's beneficial to us to live in that thought. You ever feel alone in your battle? I do. It's beneficial to me to think God is there. God is willing to send messengers. He's willing to help me in a heavenly sense. I don't think I believe it and have enough faith on certain days to feel that. And I think God works within our faith, right? I think in that day, in that moment, I was ready. And I wanted to be free so I could help other people to deal with that trauma. We talked about that call last week. One of a foot doctor in Lewistown was killed on Wednesday of last week as he was trying to drive from Lewistown to Harlowtown. And a semi passed a plow truck is what we think, and it hit him head on and killed him instantly. And I went up on Friday to all the stations and just said, "We're here, how's it going?" and talked with them a little bit. And it's amazing how many of them brought up that bad call. And I talked about that bad call. The one with the little girl behind the fire department. We're still dealing with that trauma. And we'll continue to work with each other. I wanted to share that with you not because I'm special, I have some mystery or some secret information. But I think it was real, and I felt it, and I believe it. And whatever it was instant. And I want you to have that if that's something that you want to study and think about. I think God can work in those ways. Hopefully it doesn't have to be over some horrible thing that's driving you crazy and might ruin your life. But recognizing if you're going through a tough time, pray that God would send you help. That He would send that heavenly army to be with you in those moments. As I close up here today, how do we help those in darkness? Bob, my previous story there. How do I help Bob? I don't know how to help Bob a lot of days. But I know that there are times when I don't need to try to go help Bob because I'm not where I need to be. My faith is weak. I haven't been praying as I should. I'm stressed. I think God works through stress and trauma. So there's times when I just am not willing to really go over there and spend that time. But when I am ready, I just be with him because nobody wants to be with him. He can be so rude and so mean and so hate-filled. But I'll go over there and let him listen and try to be with him for an hour. I'll drink his coffee. That's saying a lot, folks. I'm a snob with coffee. Let me tell you what he does. He's got a coffee maker that he got, and the percolator part stopped working. So you know what he did? He took a chisel and he chopped a hole in the top of the lid. And then he puts the grounds in the basket like normal, shuts the lid, and gets a tea kettle full of hot water, and he pours it through the tiny hole in the top of it and lets it drip down on its own. I've eaten his chicken soup. He makes chicken soup with like 20 jalapenos, a boiled chicken that he's boiled for all night, and then lets set out the whole next day, and puts it into a pot. It's delicious, and probably filled with salmonella. And I literally look at it, and I tell my kids, they know this, I'm like, Lord, you gotta do this one, because I'm sure it's going to kill me. But I'm going to eat it because I want to share it. I want to share in fellowship with this guy, even if it makes me sick. And so far, it has not. I think the jalapenos kill anything in it. I was sick. He made a chicken, a whole batch of it, and brought it, or called, and we went and picked it up because I was sick. And I ate that soup. And I told him it was good, and it was actually really good. I think Allison ended up eating some of it, and it was really good. He keeps his place relatively clean. I don't know about him. I'm worried about him. I don't know what his soul status is. I love him. And he says he loves me. That's all we need to do. I told him one time, I said, I don't have time. I can't do that right now. He said, no, Pastor, no, Reverend, you've got to do it. And he started like crying because no one will eat with him. And there's nothing special about me. I'm just willing to stand there sometimes take a beating, a mental beating at least. And I'm willing to drink his gross coffee that, I mean, literally, sometimes I would just put it to my lips and be like, it was still in the cup. I just kept putting it to my lips. I'm like, Lord, does that count? Because that's all I'm getting to right now. You know, literally, I've got heartburn already. And he's like, drink this pitch black coffee that looks like tar. I'm like, I take sips. Woo, yeah, that's strong. Just being with them, showing them love. Some of them haven't been touched by another human in years. Shaking their hand, putting your arm around them. Maybe the trauma of abandonment. I mean, he's seen it and done most of it, but he's also suffered a lot. What about that woman in prison? I've got a friend in Lewistown, and they are of a different belief than we are, but they are passionate, God-believing people. And they found this guy that had been released from boot camp prison, meth addict, and he was in Lewistown, and they began to visit with him. And they brought him a Bible. It actually happened in Great Falls, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure how, I can't remember all the wires and such. But it ends up, Swin is his name, and his wife Tina. And I've told some of you at youth rallies about him. They are God-believing people now. They have 3 babies because somebody took the time to tell them about Jesus. And he said, I've done it all. I've done it all. That woman that was in prison, would somebody take the time to invest in that relationship? It is nasty, dirty work. And sometimes I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it at all. I don't think he's here, but Steve Johnson in Billings now. He used to be in Great Falls. Steve is studying with people in prison. And he called me the other day. One of my guys is getting out. He's coming to the meth center there in Lewistown. I want to make sure he continues to get fed. There's people willing to do that hard, nasty work. And then when they get out, trying to get a job. We talked about Mountain States Children's Home, trying to keep these kids healthy and working and going to school and going to college. And they did this for Swin. They got him his first job. They gave him a job. He got fired. They gave him another job. And the community believed in him. He actually had stolen a camper from someone in Lewistown and drove it to Missoula and sold it. Talk about crazy. Meth will make you do crazy stuff. So he had to apologize to some local people because he was going to live in their town. And he went and apologized to them for stealing their camper at 2 a.m. It was a commercial camper sales place, not somebody's house. Kind of a big deal. Somebody invested in them. My experience with being released, Jesus removing the burden of trauma, of sin, of heartache, willing and believing that he could do that, and opening my heart to it. Why would I have not done that for those 2 or 3 weeks? Because I was overwhelmed, and I wasn't thinking clearly. We talk about, I can't remember the phrase, I think I wrote it down on my phone, but sin will almost like entrap us. Evil will entrap us to where it clouds our judgment, clouds our minds. And I think that's why it's so important for you to stay in contact with each other. Somebody looks at you and says, Russell, something ain't right. You need some help. What can we do? And reminding someone, you need to go talk to somebody. And God bless you counselors, professional counselors. But a lot of you can be just counselors that will sit and listen as well, can't you? I think sometimes we need just to talk, to confess, to relate, to be vulnerable. I am not good. There's a case right now back in Tennessee. A preacher, his son, who's 26, was unfaithful and with a 16-year-old girl in his youth group. Can you imagine the trauma? The preacher and his wife, who's the 26-year-old boy is their son, and here he's got to stand in the pulpit every Sunday. And his son went to a Christian college, all these good things, and the devil started working, young people. I don't know his story, but I guarantee you 100% it started with pornography. It started with this evil of getting into the heart and changing the heart. And then it bloomed into adultery. It bloomed into a crime that he'll go to jail for maybe decades. Sin is awful. And the devil does want to say, it's just a picture on the screen. It's just this, right? There's usually a kernel of truth that it's just this little thing. Well, that's true. It's just an image. It's just a video. That's all it is. It's really what you do with it, Russell or whoever. No, it's not just that. It's death. The devil wants to bring death to you. And he'll use anything he can. He'll use your mind. He'll use his own powers. He'll use whatever you'll give him. I don't think he's going to come and inhabit you today unless you ask for that. If you want him to come in and ruin your life. And that's what some people want because of pain and trauma and despair. These things that we talked about earlier. Deceptions. But I believe in the heavenly host. I believe that when Jesus said he could call down 10,000 angels, I believe that he could have done that at that point in time. I believe he will use whatever powers he has to bless you today and take away that pain and that trauma, whatever it might be. Confess that one to another and then give it to Jesus. He'll remove it. He did it for me. I believe it, whatever it looked like in my world, in my view, but seeing that and feeling that and knowing immediately I am free from it. God bless people that are willing to sit and be with people in very difficult times. You do that. You will do that. And give us courage to do that because there's a lot of lost people that need it. And it's hard work. I don't enjoy it some days. But I do it because I think it's what God's called me to do. And he's put me in a place where I think I can do that. Don't do it right always. And sometimes I'm angry, and sometimes I'm gritting my teeth, and I got to go over there again. That dude is so crazy. He's driving me nuts. Look at these text messages, Allison. I mean, he's called me so many names, cussed me out. I don't want to do that. Can you imagine Jesus when we do that to Jesus with sin? And he always comes back. He always comes back. Always comes back for me. He'll come back for you. Be a prayer warrior. I think a lot of what I get to do is because I've got a wife who sits under the basement stairwell in her prayer closet and prays me up. I left the other day to talk to a guy who was suicidal. I said, get to it. And I knew where she was going. She went to war, and I was going to war. It's pretty awesome to have a prayer warrior. I had texted a lady at church today. I said, I'm going to talk about this. It's possibly controversial. It's vulnerable, at least. I said, I need you praying for me. She said, what time? So she's been praying for us today as we talked about this. I'll stop there. I hope my goal with this would have been to let you see some and hear some stories from a real person, not a second-hand or third-hand, or I read this once in a book, but just to give you something of my life experience, and that maybe it would resonate to and call you to want to help others, to release something that's been bothering you, or to praise God for what he does through his mighty kingdom that we're a part of. Amen? Thank you.
Well, thanks, Russell. So we're going to have our second small group time. I think we have a lot to talk about. Thanks to Russell. So same thing, ladies will stay up here, guys will go downstairs, and teen and 20s will head upstairs. And then after that is dinner time. I'm sure some of you are probably heading out, so I pray safe travels for you as you head back to wherever you have come from. And then there is a gathering for those who are still in town tonight at 7 o'clock for some extended time of worship and time of sharing. So you're invited to come back for that. So just want to say thank you all for coming. And thanks to all those who have volunteered in so many ways. Food, the child care, the speaking, leading us in singing. So it's been a wonderful weekend so far. And let's head off to our groups. Oh, and by the way, if you want some extended study question type stuff to work through that wasn't covered in the 2 small groups, I'll put this in the back. So there's just a little more information to take home and think through. So thanks.